All right. Well, welcome to Office Hours with me, Dr. Yewande. We're going to be talking today about how to manage your emotions when things get hard. How to manage your emotions when things get hard. And I don't know about you, but maybe you've had that feeling when you are juggling a million things, whether it's deadlines, responsibilities at home, meetings. Maybe you're also taking care of aging loved ones. And then all of a sudden, one more thing gets added onto your plate. It could be a last minute request from a boss to work on a project or attend yet another meeting. It could be an urgent request from a client. It could even be maybe a child or a parent, an elderly loved one getting sick. And all of a sudden, you start to feel like you're being stretched too thin. You start to feel like you are hitting your boiling point. You're about to explode and you feel like you're about to snap. And it's not necessarily because of this one thing that has been added to your plate, it's because everything has just been piling up on each other. Well, the feeling that you are experiencing, if this is something that is sounding familiar to you, that's the feeling of being overwhelmed, which is different from stress. Stress is a part of day to day life. But when you are getting to the point where you feel like you're about to snap, you feel like you're about to explode, you just can't take it anymore, that's when you're starting to feel overwhelmed and it feels like you are now out of control. And when we're out of control of our emotions, you start getting to the point where instead of responding to a challenge or responding to things getting hard, you start to react based on how you're feeling in the moment, whether it's anger or frustration. You're reacting to a challenge from your emotions instead of responding to it in a way that makes you feel like you have a handle on things. So, today we're going to be talking about overwhelm, especially in people who are high performers, because high performers are used to handling a lot. They're used to juggling so many different things. But when high performers hit a breaking point, it can feel very scary. It affects how they show up in work. It affects how you show up in your relationships at home. And so today we're going to be talking about things that you can do in the moment to help you regulate your emotions when the stress has piled up to a point where it feels like it's now unmanageable. And not only are we going to talk about what you can do in the moment, we're also going to talk about how to prevent yourself from getting to a place where you're feeling overwhelmed, where the stress builds up. We're going to talk about how to prevent yourself from getting to that place. Okay. Before I keep going, I'm just going to check the technology one more time. Okay, good. We're good to go. All right. So, what we're going to be talking about first are the three things that you can do in the moment to regulate your emotions so that you're handling stress from a place of feeling in control instead of out of control. But if this is the first time that we are connecting, it's great to connect with you. I'm Dr. Yewande. I'm a medical doctor. I'm a psychotherapist. I'm also a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm a friend. I am active in my community as a volunteer. And so I also wear many different hats. I run a business and I help high performers reclaim their mental health so that they can continue to be high performers, not only in their professional lives, but also in their personal lives too. Because a lot of the people that I work with, they don't just care about hitting targets at work. They also want to be the best version of themselves at home as well as at work. So in their relationships with family members, with friends, in their community, they want to be able to balance both. And so I share strategies, I share insights. And so that's part of what I'm going to be doing today. And so today, let's go into talking about the three things that you can do in the moment when you're starting to feel when you're starting to feel frustrated. I've certainly been there when it comes to being overwhelmed, where I might be at work, for example, and I am doing admin or I'm catching up on paperwork, and it's been a really stressful week or a really hard week. Maybe I've had a lot of clients who are dealing with so many tough situations. I'm also dealing with maybe kids that are not well. It may be even a week when my husband is out of town. So I've been solo parenting. And it could be something as simple as my computer shutting down when when I didn't ask it to shut down, or the internet, being slow and glitchy. And all of a sudden I start to feel frustrated and I'm, banging on my keys because I'm just upset, right, in that moment. And even something as trivial as the internet not working the way it's supposed to can set me off to the point where I might be screaming. I might be tapping on my keys in a way that makes me upset. I may even get a little snappy at my kids too. Again, not because the internet by itself is a problem. It's just the stress is starting to pile up. And for me, that's a signal that I'm kind of getting to the point where I am operating in high stress, or if I'm approaching overwhelm. It's a signal for me to kind of reassess what's on my plate and take care of things. And so I don't know if anyone else has been in a situation where something so small kind of sets you off. Again, not because that single thing is a problem. It's just that in the grand scheme of things, with everything else that you have going on, it's, as we say, the straw that breaks the camel's back. It's just one extra thing that tips you over into feeling overwhelmed, like you just can't handle things anymore. So let's go into the 3 techniques. There are so many different techniques to help in the moment. But what I find is that people who are high performers, they hardly have time to really say, okay, I'm going to take a 1 hour break and go to the gym, or go for an exercise class, or go for something, a relaxing walk. It's just not realistic for them, because especially if you are someone who is very busy, you look at your calendar and it's meetings back to back to back, then it's very hard to say, oh, take an hour out of your day and go for a long walk. It's just not realistic. But when you find yourself snapping at things that really shouldn't be bothering you in a small isolated situation, I want you to take these tips and get good at practicing them, especially if you don't have the luxury of time to take an hour to go to an exercise class. So the first thing is, it's a type of grounding technique. And what's a grounding technique? A grounding technique is, and there are many different types, I'm just going to be sharing some with you. It's a way of coming back into the present moment. Many times when we feel overwhelmed, it's because we are living in the future. We're not present, or we are also ruminating about the past. So we may be getting stressed and anxious about things to come, or we may be stuck in that meeting that didn't go well, or that client conversation that didn't go well. So grounding techniques are a way to bring you into the present. And what that does is it brings down the stress level, especially when you're approaching feeling overwhelmed, because again, like I said, when we're overwhelmed, it makes it really, really hard to manage emotions like anger and frustration. So the grounding technique that I want to share with you today is the 5-4-3-2-1 method. So the 5-4-3-2-1 method, and you may have heard of this method before. It's actually very simple. And so all it is it's using your 5 senses. So the 5 senses that you have. So it's also called the 5 senses method. And so what it is taking the time to find 5 things that you can see. So 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can touch, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. Okay. Now, I don't want you to get hung up about which sense goes with which number. To be honest, it doesn't really matter. All that matters is that you are engaging 1 or 2 or 3 of these senses. So you can even pick your favorite. Some of my favorites are sound. I like to really ground myself with sound. So I'm the type of person that I will listen to something relaxing, especially the sound of water. The sound of water can be very relaxing for me. But if you're going to use the grounding, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 or the five senses technique, please don't get hung up about which sense goes with which number. 5 things you can see is very simple. 4 things that you can hear, 4 things that you can touch, again, very simple, and 3 things that you can hear. And if you want to go into taste and smell, that's great too. But even if you do those 3, that's fine. Okay. So let's spend the next 30 seconds or so practicing the 5 senses grounding method. Now, the other thing that can be helpful is for you to have a printout of the 5 senses method and put it in a part of your office or your home. For many of my clients, it's their kitchen where you tend to get the most overwhelmed, frustrated, angry. So having a printout of the 5 senses, putting it somewhere that you can see as a visual reminder for whenever you get overwhelmed, you can just look at the printout and it'll cue you to say, hey, this might be a good time to ground myself using the 5 senses. So having said all of that, let's just spend the next 1 minute or so practicing. So we'll start with 5 things that you can see. And it shouldn't take too much to find 5 things, but I'd like for you to take it a step further and just notice the things around you. Don't just name them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because then you would be going through it too quickly. Again, the idea is to become more present, right? So whatever it is that you're looking at, take the time to name it. Take the time to even identify what color it is. You might want to just name the shapes on the object. So for example, I might be looking at a book and the book is black and orange and it has white lettering on it. So that's the first thing. Then you would go to the next thing and then the next thing and the next thing. So I'm going to give you 5 seconds to go through 5 things that you can see. Okay, so now that you've identified 5 things you can see, next I want you to identify 4 things that you can touch. And it may not necessarily be things that you touch with your fingers. It could also be things that you can feel. So 4 things you can touch or feel. And so that might be being able to feel your jewelry or your watch on your wrist and just paying attention to what it feels like. Being able to feel your hair on your face or the back of your neck. And again, just being able to identify what that feels like. So you may even just pick up a pen and just feel, what does that feel like? Does it feel smooth? Does it feel cold? Does it feel metallic? And again, using a few descriptive words to bring you from being up in your head, thinking, ruminating, being anxious, being stressed, into your body. So let's spend the next 5 seconds again identifying 4 things that you can feel or touch. Okay, and now we're going to go into 3 things that you can hear. Depending on where you are, it may be fairly quiet or it may be fairly noisy. If you are in your office, you may be able to hear your colleagues in the hallway. You may be able to hear like just the soft buzzing sound of your computer, or it could be the air conditioning or the fan or the heat, depending on what part of the world that you're in. So yeah, just spend the next, again, 5 seconds identifying 3 things that you can hear. And now 2 things that you can smell. Is it the smell of soap on your hands or your lotion? Is it the smell of your neighbor's food if it's around lunchtime? right? And so is it the smell of someone warming their lunch in the microwave in the office kitchen down the hall? So just again, spend some time identifying two things that you can smell. And then finally, one thing that you can taste. Is it gum? Is it mint? Is it leftover coffee or tea? What is the one thing that you can taste? And so talking through this with you took a couple of minutes because I was giving you examples and I was talking you through how to actually use this technique. But in reality, this will take you less than a minute to do. So if you're finding that as your day is progressing, you're starting to feel more and more overwhelmed, your emotions are getting harder to control, pull out this technique, this five senses technique. Again, don't get too hung up about memorizing which sense goes with what. If you want, you can print out a visual cue, a visual reminder to help you identify that. But even if you focus on five things you can see, that is good enough. And then doing that a couple of times throughout the course of your day, that can help continue to ground you. All right, so let's go on to the second technique. Again, what we're talking about today is when you're feeling overwhelmed, knowing that emotions can get really hard to control and manage when you're feeling overwhelmed. But in the moment, when you start to notice that tension is rising, you're feeling a bit out of control, I'm sharing with you some techniques that you can do in the moment. I'm also going to be sharing towards the end of our time together today things that you can do to prevent yourself from even getting overwhelmed. But once you start to notice you're getting overwhelmed, you can try the grounding technique that we just spoke about. Next, you can try breathing. Now, I know that you probably heard that breathing is good for you. Breathing is good for managing stress. It's good for managing, just feeling overwhelmed. But I feel like the simplest things are often the hardest to do because we just don't believe that they're helpful. But I promise you that breathing is not just something that we say because it's nice to say. It has been backed up with evidence. And the reason that breathing is so helpful is that breathing techniques help to stimulate the part of your nervous system that gets activated when you're stressed. So it helps to calm that part of your nervous system down so that you're not feeling like you're constantly in survival mode. When we're overwhelmed, our nervous system believes that we are in survival mode. We sometimes will call that fight or flight or freeze, fight or flight or freeze or fawn. You may have heard different variations of that, but all that speaks to is your nervous system being activated because it's so stressed and overwhelmed. And when you breathe, you're helping to calm down the nervous system. Now, there are many different breathing techniques. I'm just going to share with you the simplest one, and that is breathing in for 4 counts and breathing out for 6 counts. And so you breathe in for 4, breathe out for 6, and you can do that for 30 seconds, just repeating the cycle during the course of your day. Okay, so we're going to practice that together, and then we're going to move on to the third thing that you can do when you're feeling overwhelmed. So again, breathing in for 4 seconds. So take a breath in through your nose for 4 seconds, and then it'll be out through your mouth for 6 seconds. So let's do that together. In through your nose and out through your mouth. And I already feel much calmer just doing that. So again, something very quick, something very simple, but very effective in helping to break that cycle of feeling overwhelmed throughout the course of your day. Now, the last thing that I want to share when it comes to feeling overwhelmed in the moment and a technique that you can use is movement. Movement. And again, something that you've probably heard before, but just want to remind you how important it is for you to move your body, especially in this age where many of us are working in offices, we're very sedentary. It's so tempting to just sit at your desk for 8 hours at a stretch going from meeting to meeting to meeting and really not moving your body. When stress builds up, it doesn't just stay in our mind, it actually ends up moving into different parts of our bodies. And this is why people will say things like, okay, when I get stressed, I get a migraine, or when I get stressed, my neck or my back or my hip begins to hurt. And it's because the body has a way of storing stress in different parts of our bodies. So when you get up and move, it's a way of releasing some of that stress. So it could be anything as simple as even just standing up and doing a stretch, or walking around your office, or going up and down the stairs if you're in an office building. It could even be just shaking out your hands or rolling your shoulders. Or if you're feeling really ambitious, putting on a song and actually dancing. You know, if you have a private office, or if you're working from home, putting on your favorite song and dancing and moving your body. For various reasons, which I won't get into, movement can be so powerful in releasing the stress. And again, similar to breathing, getting the part of your nervous system that's activated to calm down so that you don't feel as tense. Now, if you're a mom, or if you're a parent, or someone who is taking care of a caregiver at home, and you find that the evenings can tend to get really stressful, I will encourage you to pull in the family and have a dance party before you switch into shutting down for the evening, or maybe before dinner, or even after dinner, and just get everyone involved. Because yes, we get stressed as parents, as caregivers, but everybody in the house, if I'm stressed, the chances are everybody else in the household is probably stressed too. So you can even incorporate that as part of your evening routine, a 5 minute dance party. It's not only good for bonding as a family, but it's also good for your stress levels as well. So I'm going to do a quick recap. Um, Today, so far, we've talked about 3 things that you can do in the moment when you're finding that your emotions are getting harder and harder to manage because you're in a state of feeling overwhelmed. We talked about a grounding technique called the 5-4-3-2-1 method, or the 5 senses. We talked about the breathing technique, so breathing in for 4 seconds and out for 6 seconds. And we also talked about the importance of movement. And as promised, I said I would talk about not just things that you can do in the moment, because as we say in medicine, well, do we say this in medicine? But it's true in medicine that prevention is better than cure. It's something that I heard a lot growing up, but prevention of something is much better than cure. And so if you've been burnt out before, you know that it's a very, very scary place to be. I find that my clients who have been through burnout before are the ones who are like, I can feel the signs and I'm so scared to go to that place again. I really don't want to be burnt out again. What can I do to prevent this from happening? So I'm going to spend the last few minutes of our session today just talking about the things that you can do to prevent burnout from happening. And again, burnout is really just the result of being overwhelmed. When our stress is unchecked, it's unmanaged, we become overwhelmed. And when we don't listen to our bodies, then we get burnt out. Okay, so when you start to notice that you're feeling stressed, know that it's a good indicator that something needs to change, especially if you don't want to get burnt out. Okay, so our discussion today is about managing emotions. It's not just about what we do in the moment, kind of putting out a fire. It's also about what we can do to set ourselves up so that you don't get overwhelmed in the first place. So I'm going to start by talking about self-care. And before you roll your eyes, I know that self-care is a word that has been used and abused, okay? And don't worry, I'm not going to talk to you about a 1-hour morning routine or taking an hour in the middle of your day to go for a walk or an exercise class. I know that you don't have the luxury of all that time. But what I want to talk about are small pockets of micro self-care moments throughout the course of your day, because I know you don't have the time to do some of these things that social media influencers are telling you to do to take care of yourself. You may not even have the luxury of taking a day or half a day to go get a massage, right? Those things, especially in the season of life you're in right now, may not be very realistic. But having small pockets of micro self care moments throughout the course of your day can be very helpful and very effective. I was speaking to a family member last week, and we were talking about exercise and how in his mind exercise had to be like this 1 hour thing 5 days a week. And if you don't exercise for 1 hour or 45 minutes a day, then what's the point of doing it? And I said, well, every movement that you do counts, even if it's 10 minutes a day. And so it's the same with self-care. It doesn't have to be this long, elaborate list of things. You can literally do smaller things in smaller pockets of time throughout the course of your day or throughout the course of your week. So it could be even something as simple. One thing I encourage my clients to do is, instead of working and eating at the same time, actually shutting down, blocking it off in your schedule, in your calendar, and really taking time to sit down and eat and enjoy your lunch. Some of them will actually go outside for lunch, even if it's a 15-minute break, 20-minute break. And even that break in your day can help refuel you a little bit so that the stress doesn't keep compounding throughout the course of your day. So think about what the things are, whether it's even spending 5 minutes just writing things that you're grateful for, gratitude journaling. It doesn't have to be this long, elaborate list of things that people might tell you are, what self-care is. These small, micro self-care moments can be just as effective, definitely better than doing nothing at all. Now, when it comes to preventing overwhelm, the next thing I'm going to talk about is less strategic and more of a mindset. And it's a mindset of letting go of control. Okay. Learning to let go of control. As high performers, I know that your results and your outcome is very important to you. Like, you are known for your results, you're known for your outcome, your output, you're known for hitting your targets and even exceeding your targets. The problem is that the more you try to control your outcome, the more stressed that you are. And especially when you have a lot going on, this is just feeding and fueling the overwhelm even more. So you may want to have your kids on a certain kind of schedule where it's like, these are the things that we're getting done today. And no matter what, we're getting them done. And if you don't get them done, you're hard on yourself and you're hard on everyone else around you potentially. Or maybe at work, you have these expectations of yourself to deliver 120%, 120% of the time, right? Which again is impossible, right? So here I'm speaking to even expectations. Are your expectations realistic for the season of time that you're in? You can't control everything, and trying to control everything will just keep adding more to your stress, and the stress just continues to compound until such a time as you eventually feel overwhelmed and maybe even burnt out. So I want to encourage you to really learn to let go of perfection, let go of the need to micromanage everyone and micromanage what people are doing or micromanage results. Accept that things will not always go as planned. And that's okay. Like, especially if you're already feeling stressed, if you're already burnt out, your capacity may not be the same. So accept that things won't always go the way that you plan for them to go. And then focus on what you can control and what you have the capacity to control. All right. And so letting go of control, learning to let go of control. I understand that this is a hard thing for many to do, but just take it one step at a time. You may decide that you want to start by experimenting with learning to let go of control at home on the weekends and starting there. Like, maybe on a Saturday, you're not as rigid with what you plan and what everybody needs to do. And when you get comfortable with letting go of control at home, then extending that to learning to let go of control at work, and so you're not micromanaging your team and micromanaging everything. You're not striving for perfection all the time. And the last thing, again, more of a mindset thing as opposed to a strategy thing when it comes to how to prevent yourself from getting overwhelmed, is big picture. All right. Is thinking big picture, looking at things from higher level, zooming out, as I like to call it, and looking at your life beyond the day to day to do lists and the checklists and the deadlines and the deliverables, and asking yourself a question like, is this going to matter a month from now? Or how much is this going to matter a month from now? And if you say, well, it's probably going to matter like 50%, okay, how much is this going to matter 6 months from now? How much is this going to matter a year from now? Does it really matter if your kids are in their pajamas all day on Saturday? Is it really going to matter a year from now if they skip one piano class, or if they skip one swimming class? Is it really going to matter? Is it really going to matter if they skip hockey practice for this week and next week? Is it really going to matter a month from now, 6 months from now, a year from now? And so being able to kind of zoom out and look at the situation in the bigger picture can often be helpful in letting go of the tension that you feel when you're trying to perform, when you're trying to get things to look the way that you want them to look. Okay. So just to summarize, first of all, I want to just say that being a high performer is not a bad thing. So don't let anyone make you feel like it's a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. But remember that too much of a good thing can also cost us, right? And when we are saying yes to something, we're saying no to something else. If you've been feeling overwhelmed lately, if you feel like you've been approaching burnout, again, don't be hard on yourself. It's not because you're weak. It's not because you can't cut it. It's because as humans, we just weren't designed to put so much pressure on ourselves. It may also be that you just haven't been taught how to listen to the signals that your body is putting out, asking you to slow down and take care of it more. It's just that you have been carrying a lot of different things, a lot of different responsibilities, and perhaps you just haven't had the right tools to manage everything. And I want to just remind you that you're actually doing much better than you think that you are. Okay, I'm not going to get into negativity bias and all of that, but I just want to remind you that regardless, especially as a high performer, you are your own worst critic and you tend to be hard on yourself. So I'm just here to remind you that you are doing so much better than you think you are. When you're overwhelmed, you might feel powerless, you might feel out of control, you might feel like you've lost your capacity to manage your emotions. But I hope that the things that I've shared with you today, first of all, the 3 things that you can do in the moment, so grounding, using the 5 senses, breathing, and then movement, so things that you can do in the moment when you feel overwhelmed, and then the things that you can do to prevent yourself from getting overwhelmed again. I hope that they have been helpful. They may seem like small shifts, but again, it's the small things that you're more likely to stay consistent with, and the things that will compound over time to make a big impact. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Ooh, I'm so sorry. I haven't been looking at the chat. I'm going to look at the chat. I see Gazille. Hi, Gazille. Letting go is the hardest for me. I love scheduling and my body lets me down. I doze off or forget to do some things. And yeah, so I talk about the concept of grace a lot in my practice. As a high performer, you want to always be, I know you want to be on your A game all the time. But when your body is telling you that, hey, you're pushing me a bit too hard, I need to slow down, it's so important to listen. Thank you for that comment. I also have a comment that says, today I had to coach myself since I was in an extremely overwhelming spot. I breathed deeply and reminded myself I'm well regulated, I'm in control of my response, and that really helped me get through. Thank you so much. I think self-coaching is something that we underestimate the power of, and the fact that you are able to get yourself out of that overwhelming spot to a place where you are regulated, that says a lot. So talking to yourself um, in a way that's positive and encouraging is very helpful in the moment. So thank you so much for sharing. Awesome. So thank you everyone for joining today's live. If today's conversation resonated with you, then if today's conversation resonated with you, if you found it helpful, if you found it's the type of thing that you want to learn more of, I'd like to invite you to join my mailing list. I send practical tips like this on a bi-weekly schedule. And if this is something that resonates, I will continue to provide ongoing support in the mailing list. I think, Mia, if you could just drop the link in the chat. I thought I had it ready, but if you could just drop the link to the mailing list in the newsletter. It's called Doing Well Digest, and I share practical tips like this on a bi-weekly basis. So, okay, I think hopefully this shows up. Hopefully that shows up. I just shared it in the chat, but Mia, if you could also please put it in the chat, that would be great. And so that way, if you want to learn more, connect more, continue the conversation, I'm happy to do so on a bi-weekly basis. And I will continue to connect with you on LinkedIn as well too. I'm also on Instagram, YouTube, all the places. It would be great to connect. I also have a podcast called Happy Without Medicine. And so if this is the type of content you enjoy, then definitely also go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. All right, everyone, take care and have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye.